let's talk about you a little bit. You've got a new game company, Winn Games. Will Jeffrey.
There's an interesting story around that. I don't know if we have time to get into that, but
give us a short one.
The primary person that was going to help fund this initially, they came back and they said, this sounds a lot like an incubator. We already fund a couple incubators, so we don't really want to fund an incubator. We want to fund something that has the potential of making money. We pivoted. So, overnight, we basically came back to them and said, okay, we want to form a company. We had to come up with a name, last minute. My last name is Winn, and that works well with games. And Will Jeffrey, who's my colleague in all of this, it was like, well, what if we put these things together and be Winn Games?
Hello world, you're listening to SPARTIE-Cast.
Hello, SPARTIE-Casters. This episode, I speak with Professor Brian Winn, who's my colleague here at the Department of Media and Information at Michigan State University. We talk about how he went from a master's student to the director of the Games for Entertainment and Learning Lab, GEL Lab. We talk about the conference Meaningful Play, how the name came to be, serious games, maybe not as palatable to some people as Meaningful Play. It covers the gamut. It's not just games for health or education. It's also games that have meaningful outcomes that are still focused toward entertainment. And we talk about the future Meaningful Play conference, Meaningful Play 2022, October 13th through 15th. Please come, please submit something. If you have a game, if you have a paper about games that frames them in a way that is meaningful, do it. We combine the industry perspective with the research perspective in this conference. There are people from kind of both sides of those aisles. There are people who try to merge those inquiries or those approaches to games. So it's a really great conference. Brian started it, and I'm lucky to be involved in organizing it. And then we also talk about Brian's new game studio, which he started with a former GEL Lab student, Will Jeffrey, and it's called Winn Games. They produce a game called Plunder Panic, which I've played. Up to 12 people at the same time can play this game, which is pretty cool. That's more than Smash Brothers. And it's not just that. You can play with teams online and local. You're all around the screens, or you're kind of mixed modality, and you can have humans and AI, or just humans, kind of any size team. It's really fun. It's a pretty cool, innovative game, certainly meaningful in many ways. So listen to the episode, come to Meaningful Play, check out Plunder Panic. Hope you enjoy. Hello, Brian Winn. Welcome to SPARTIE-Cast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's weird to talk to you like that because we like talk in the hallways. We're colleagues, but you've been here a fair amount longer than I have at Michigan State University. And so can you just tell us a little bit about what it is that you do here?
Yeah, well, I've been here a long time. I actually came to graduate school here back in 1993. So I have been here, one of the longest people likely. And a little bit of an oddball in that sense, to kind of be here in graduate school and then stick around. I worked in a research and development lab called the Communication Technology Lab, which was led by the esteemed Carrie Heater, who now recently retired. And, basically became her right-hand person for several years, and was teaching on the side because there was, at that time, the web was taking off and interactive multimedia and things like that. There weren't a lot of people out there with those skill set. So I began teaching on the side, and, then they tried to hire multiple hires, in the late 90s for this position. And, they weren't able to find who, a replacement for me. And that, and I was about to leave out to industry, and, they said, maybe you should apply in this next round. And I did that. And, I think that was in 2001 year.
I didn't realize you were considering jumping over to industry.
Yeah. I was packing my bags, because I kind of committed to be, with Carrie for 5 years after my graduation.
Mhm.
And, it's getting those first 5 years of experience is always the challenge, right? So I pretty much had served that time and, really loved doing it. But, I didn't see a lot of upward mobility in my current position. So I originally was not considering life in academia as an option, I guess, or as a thing that I really wanted to do. But like I said, I really liked what I was doing. It was like, can this continue? And when the tenure stream position line came open and they recommended I apply and went through the process and was ultimately offered the position, then I had to make the tough choice, like, okay, do I want to continue in this trajectory for a long time, or do I want to jump to industry? And obviously I the choice that I made.
Sure, you made the choice, and it's a very unique path that you've carved out for yourself, right? Like, you don't have the research background, but you're a tenured full professor now after having spent these years kind of doing research, but also building up an amazing games lab, the Games for Entertainment and Learning Lab, the GEL Lab, which grew out of the Immersive Technologies Lab, I guess. When did you change the name?
Yeah, so I became, tenure stream faculty in 2001, fall of 2001. And, I taught my first ever game course, I think just prior to that, as the special topics. So when I became regular faculty, we made our first games course on the book. And, by 2005, we had grown that one course into a 4-course sequence. And, we were doing more and more things related to games. Yeah.
How did you know that was a good idea? Like, were there other programs doing that? Was there some sort of competitive analysis or?
Yeah, I mean, it was just a passion of mine. When I went through, undergrad, graduate program, I always wanted to be doing things with games, but there was no curriculum out there. So I did a lot of self-learning. My background's in more computer science, so obviously I had the programming chops to do it. But I also was very interested in the design side of things and kind of combining the two together. So like I mentioned, I was teaching a lot of things like web design and multimedia, hypermedia, kind of these dated terms. So it was sort of a natural progression to do games. And certainly at the time, the hot programs were like Carnegie Mellon, and, USC was just ramping up on their program. So there were other programs out there. I wouldn't say we did like a formal competitive analysis, but it was, it was something that I wanted to do. And in the interviewing process, it's something that I pitched.
And the games industry was burgeoning, right? It was starting to make more money than the film industry around that time, probably. And so they
exactly,
invested.
Yeah. And, and then the whole idea of serious games was just really starting to take off. I was kind of at the beginning of all that. And like I mentioned, we grew the number of courses that we're teaching. In the communication technology lab, we were doing more and more games and virtual reality type projects. And, at one point, Carrie was kind of like, hey, I'm going to step back from kind of running this lab. And, we're doing a lot of game stuff. So what do you think? And, and I was like, well, I would love to take it over, but we really should rebrand it so people know what we're doing, because communication technology was, a little bit of a dated term and a general term, so we rebranded as the Games for Entertainment and Learning Lab, or the GEL Lab, in 2005. Yeah. So we've been the GEL Lab since 2005.
Since 2005. Okay. And at what point did the Meaningful Play conference start?
I think in 2000, I'm trying to remember, 2006, 2007, we ran a conference at MSU called Future Play, which was in collaboration with some colleagues, some peers in Canada. And, they had run that conference up in Canada for a couple of years, and then they brought it down and ran it here. And that was kind of our first time running, a big conference, at MSU related to games. And, we really enjoyed that. And I think Future Play ended up going on and being kind of gobbled up by GDC Canada or something like that, a couple of years later. But after running Future Play, we were like, hey, we should do something here. And it should relate to kind of the mission of the GEL Lab, which was, looking at games, from both kind of a research perspective and from a design perspective, actually building games. And, the goal of Meaningful Play, originally was to do that, was to kind of marry research and the creative act, marry academia and industry and bring them together into one place. So 2008 was the first meaningful play that we ran at MSU.
Wow.
And, as you know, running a conference is a lot of work. So we're like, well, we can't do this every year, but we can do it every other year. So, since 2008, we've basically ran it every other year, all the way up to, through 2018. We were planning on 2020, but of course, COVID hit. So we rescheduled to 2021, and then COVID was still going. We ended up rescheduling, basically effectively canceling 2020. And so we're planning for, fall of 2022.
Okay.
It's October 13th through the 15th.
October 13th through the 15th. Put it in your calendar, listener.
Exactly. Yeah. So we're, excited to, get back together because, I'm sure it's the same for you. Going to conferences is when you get to have those great conversations with people, in our field. And, that's definitely been missing for the last few years. So I'm very excited to return to meaningful play in 2022.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Another date to keep in mind is the submission deadline. And I'm just looking over here at the timeline for the previous conference. It looks like we probably aim for June, mid-June. The CFP will come out. Full disclosure, yeah. I'm also involved in organizing this. So
yeah,
Brian and I
we are co-chairs to some extent, and with others as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we're still working out the kinks of the details for this upcoming conference. But I thought that this kind of historically oriented podcast episode would help people get excited about the conference and keep an eye open for the call and maybe start to think about some ideas. So what kinds of work is supported at Meaningful Play? What's been the most interesting aspects or the biggest draw for audiences?
Yeah. So, obviously being called Meaningful Play was very purposeful. It certainly ties into the whole kind of serious game side of thing, but, there's some of us that don't like serious games as a term because it kind of sounds like not fun games.
Chocolate covered broccoli.
Exactly. So, Meaningful Play is a very inclusive term that, not only covers what would traditionally be thought of as serious games, but also even entertainment, because doing things for pure enjoyment is certainly meaningful, especially, right now and across this pandemic. People found relief in playing games, during their time in quarantine and so forth. We look at certainly an academic perspective on games, people that are doing research on games holistically. It could be games that are out there commercially. It could be games that are built in labs such as mine and human subjects run through and data gathered and that sort of thing, and bringing those results to this conference. But we also always try to bring in an industry perspective as well. We try to break our keynotes. We typically have 6 keynotes across the conference, kind of a morning and afternoon each day. And about half of those, we try to make industry keynotes so we can bring in that side of things. And of course, also bring in additional speakers and people from industry beyond just academia.
Can I invite some of our past industry guests on SPARTIE-Cast? People who are working awesome. in the metaverse space. The metaverse is meaningful play, and in many ways, it's not the way that certainly some of the industry is talking about it. It's not just play for entertainment, though that can be meaningful. I agree. You can have very kind of eye-opening, substantive experiences when you're playing for fun, but also socializing in virtual worlds. That counts as meaningful play, right?
Oh, certainly. Yeah. And we've definitely had an angle, related to your research interest areas, people studying avatars, people in virtual reality, augmented reality, and so forth. That was a big focus of 2018. And I assume that will continue into 2022.
Are the conferences ever themed? Do you know what I mean? Like there's this kind of specific theme for this year?
Yeah, we haven't ever really done a really focused theme. Sometimes we've had a track, within the conference where we have a sequence of different talks and panels and, that sort of thing. Sometimes workshops that are all within a certain track. We've done ones on kind of like games and learning in the past. But yeah, that's a good idea. As we are, like I said, we need to get our ducks in a row and figure out all of the plans for 2022.
I'm totally gonna pitch a metaverse theme for this one. I mean, somehow
good.
connect your game or your scenario, your research to the idea of the metaverse. I think that could fly. That could get some industry interest. Hello, listener. It's me, but I'm an avatar. You probably learn about avatars in this podcast, but you can actually try them out, not just in video games, but in spaces like Zoom. I'm using Zoom to record this right now. This avatar I created with Ready Player Me. Remember in episode a long time ago, I talked to Timo Toke, the CEO of Wolf 3D. That's the company that makes Ready Player Me. I took a screenshot of myself with my camera, a selfie, I should say, and I created an avatar automatically, customized it in their app. Then I posted it in Animaze. That's the software I'm using right now. They are the sponsor of this message, and they are giving a 50% discount on subscriptions. You can try it for free, but if you want to subscribe, you enter SPARTIE Lab as the discount code. That's SPARTIE Lab. So you can use a Ready Player Me avatar, like I mentioned. You can also upload your own VRM or live 2D models, or you can make avatars right in Animaze. For example, you could use the Doge avatar. And I don't know. I mean, it might have seemed like a strange thing at first, but Dogecoin is still making bucks. But you could use the Doge avatar or one of their very cool anthropomorphic animals, such as the Fluffo, the raccoon. Totally detailed. Look at this. It's so responsive. People use these types of avatars to stream or go to Zoom meetings or go to court cases and say, I am not a cat. There are also two-dimensional avatars like this raccoon or more anthropomorphic avatars that aren't even animals, like this cute pandemic virus right here. Corey the COVID. Maybe this one won't win you too many friends. I really like Kathy. She's quite a catch. You could choose whichever avatar you like. And then you could even apply some of the concepts like the Proteus effect or other phenomena related to avatars in the workplace to your uses of these avatars based on what you've learned in this podcast. And once again, if you want to try it out, go to Steam, download Animaze, try it for free, and then if you want a subscription, you can get 50% off for a limited time by entering SPARTIE Lab in the discount code. Check it out. So we've got this conference coming up, and you've given us a bit of the history, but let's talk about you a little bit more. So we heard your background, but you've got this cool new project. You've got a new game company, Winn Games, named for your partner's first name and your last name. Will Jeffrey.
There's an interesting story around that. I don't know if we have time to get into that, but
give us a short one.
Just a little bit of the background of this project. You know, in the Gel Lab, we've produced many games across the years, and it's always a challenge. Like, what do we do at the end of the project? You know, and a lot of things are grant funded. You know, funded by the NIH or the NSF or NASA, and you know those are funded by tax dollars. So generally, those we just put out, you know, essentially into the public domain, open source, into the world. And the, you know, executable, you know, we put on, for example, like the Apple App Store or Google Play and that sort of thing. But, you know, there are occasions where we built things that, you know, have value. People are interested in these things and they're not funded through those sources. You know, so how do we get it out there? And you know, MSU is very risk averse. You know, they don't want to sign contracts with Nintendo and Sony and Microsoft and things like that. So it's always been a challenge of figuring out, well, what do we do with these things? Because we put a lot of energy into them. So we began talking about, well, should we have a commercial branch of the Gel Lab? And, you know, we went down that path for about a year talking with the folks at MSU. There's a division called MSU Technologies, which kind of handles the intellectual property at MSU and, you know, gets it out into the world. You typically licensing it, you know, so we were talking about starting a branch of, you know, Gel Studios was sort of our term at the time, of external to MSU, you know, like a C Corp, or a limited liability company that would be external to MSU and would license things out and then bring them to the market, which generally would involve additional development and certainly marketing, publishing, that sort of thing. And we also talked about the student angle, like, hey, students are doing some cool things. How do they get their work out into the world? So we've been developing this for about a year. The MSU Foundation, which was, the primary person that was going to help fund this initially, they came back and they said, this sounds a lot like an incubator, and we already fund a couple incubators. So we don't really want to fund an incubator because that's like a nonprofit. We want to fund something that has the potential of making money, because that's what our venture arm does. So literally overnight, we had to kind of pivot and be like, okay, we like a lot of what we were saying, a lot of the vision of this, but it can't be set up as an incubator that brings in students and incubates their project and Java Lab projects and things like that. So we pivoted. We had a game that we developed a couple of years ago called Plunder Panic, which had received some success out in the world, won a few awards like the Independent Games Festival Audience Choice Award, a finalist at South by Southwest. We were an official selection at the Indie Mega booth at PAX East, and we'd shown it to a lot of people and they really loved playing it. And we're like, hey, this is the perfect example of a passion project, a self-funded game that we should bring out to the world. So, overnight, we basically came back to them and said, okay, we want to form a company. We had to come up with a name, last minute. And it was sort of, my last name is Winn, and that works well with games. And Will Jeffrey, who's, my colleague in all of this, it was like, well, what if we put these things together and be Winn Games? And, of course, at the time, MSU had this Spartans Will campaign. So
that works too.
It works in with that as well. So anyways, we came back and we pitched Winn Games. Our inaugural title was to license Plunder Panic from the university. And, we made the business case of how this could be successful. We still wanted to have the mission of being a first step for students graduating. Often that first job is the tough thing to get, and we have a great program here, in a top 10 ranked program by Princeton Review. So we wanted to, kind of have that next leg of the stool in terms of enhancing our program. So that's one of our missions of Winn Games, to, take graduates out of the program and provide them with that first job. And, since we've started, we've hired about 10 students, former students that are alumni.
Wow. How long have you been operational with Winn Games?
We're about a year in. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think it was September of 2020 is when we officially formed, but of course there was a couple months of real early on. So really December 2020 is when we started to ramp up and we began to hire people in January.
Most of the hires are working on getting Plunder Panic out or new IP.
So yeah, we're working mostly on Plunder Panic right now. As expected, when you develop something, iteratively, kind of experimentally, kind of on the side within with student labor,
the code's a little messy.
It goes a little messy. So, we basically had to, make some hard decisions with that. Like we had a game that was functional and worked well. It was, up to 12-person multiplayer game, but it was local multiplayer and we're in the middle of a pandemic. So, releasing a game that required 12 people to be together locally didn't make a lot of sense when at the time of decision making, there were restrictions on how many people could even be together in one household, which was less than 12. Yeah. So, we made the hard decision to basically rewrite the game from scratch to be an internet-based multiplayer game that obviously also supports local.
Will it support 12 local?
It supports 12 local. It does. Yeah. So it still does that. It supports up to 12, any combination. You have 2 people local in one place, 3 people in another place, and so forth. Right. And you can go, up to 12 people. So, which is a little bit unique, we found amongst games. Usually multiplayer games are kind of like 1 player per device, that are connecting. So, we have a little bit of a unique aspect there. And then we also added, cool. We added AI players. So, if you are an individual and want to play the game, you could add up to 11 AI. Okay. And, and our game doesn't require 12 players. I mean, you could play, 2 versus 2, 3 versus 3, that sort of thing.
With any number of AI.
Yeah. Yep. So
Have you considered, this is something I think about in research. When you play a sports game often and you're in control of a team, hockey, Brian and I are on a hockey team together, by the way.
yeah,
World.
play hockey. Yeah.
Brian's very good. I'm very noob. But you're playing a hockey video game and you can switch your player. You can control the AI who's closest to the puck, or if you get the puck, you're in control. And then the others on your team are AI for those moments. I've referred to that as an ephemeral avatar, or maybe they're controllable agents. I think about this because it's an interesting switch in the mental model psychologically that we have between interacting with a social other, someone who's not me, and then turning it into a self-representation, an avatar that is me or a representation of me. And there are different psychological theories that describe how we interact with social others or agents or avatars. But that's always in sports games. Would you consider a mechanic in Plunder Panic where you could switch around the AI you're controlling?
We sort of have that now. Like, I mean, obviously when you start the game, you pick your avatar. There's a series of 6 different characters that you pick. And then in the game, basically, if there's like a technical glitch, like, you unplug your controller or a player drops, that player doesn't just disappear. They get taken over by AI. And then if they plug their controller back in or they get reconnected, they could retake over that character again. If that makes sense. So it can kind of go back and forth between AI and a human player.
Sure.
But I think what you're saying is just take the next logical step of being able to capture one of those AI,
capture the one who's closest to the cannonball or whatever it is. I think there's psychologically, it's a really interesting phenomenon, just to go off on this slightly boring tangent, but maybe it's relevant to you. So when we communicate with social others or we're on the same team as them, we often use social rules. So politeness, if the AI is polite to me, I'll be polite back, that kind of thing. When I control it as an avatar, you've probably heard me talk about the Proteus effect. Do you remember this? Yeah. So the avatar's characteristics will influence me. If it's a taller avatar, I'll negotiate more aggressively. Well, what if the AI has some characteristics like in Smash Brothers? I believe in Plunder Panic, all of the characters essentially have the same abilities, right? Or actually, one of them is the captain.
One of them is the captain, which has some unique abilities. Yeah.
Okay, but besides that, it's equivalent.
Yeah. And then in the game, there are things that you can do to change your abilities. So you can go out in the world and get gold and bring it back to the sword shop and buy a sword, which then makes you more dangerous in the world because now you have a sword. There are different items that drop into the world or that you could get into the world, like TNT or like a Molotov cocktail. And obviously you can pick those up and interact with those and have an effect in the world.
Yeah. That's interesting. I think it's pretty rare for humans to be able to switch identities quickly. Often in these team games, when I'm switching around from avatar to avatar, they're all basically equivalent, right? But if you add the Proteus effect to this idea of ascribing social identity characteristics to different AI, and I take on these different AI, maybe one's more powerful, it has a sword or it doesn't, that could be a pretty unique psychological experience, right? And maybe it affects how I see myself, all right now I'm empowered with a sword, but oh no, I need to be the savior over there. And that's a rare, maybe people would hate it and it's a terrible design idea. Don't ask the psychology type researcher for the best game design tips, but at least I think it'd be unique.
Yeah, I think there's some interesting ideas there, and certainly some things may be worthy of researching further.
Sure.
And building some, prototypes.
Yeah. And that's one thing that we've done together also is we've started, we call it the GEL Research, GEL-R initiative, where we work with PhD students and we look at games that GEL has made, sponsored, let's say, by MSU FCU, the Federal Credit Union, and looking at how playing the game affects financial literacy. I can tell you, we just analyzed some data, Brian. It looks like after playing the game, people did worse on some of the math type questions. I think it's just because they're tired from playing the game, so they don't have as much cognitive energy. So we'll have to see if we actually publish that or not. We need to delve in. But
yeah,
this is so exciting. You guys are making a game that is breaking boundaries for multiplayer, local, online. And it's also a new endeavor for you, as I mean, you wanted to go to industry potentially 20 years ago, and here you are kind of doing it on the side.
Yeah, I mean, so far it's gone really well. We released what's called early access on Steam for PC and Mac. So we're ultimately supporting, I think, 7 platforms, possibly 9. So we've got 2 of them out now, and we're as is always in game development, it's an iterative process, and the quicker you can have players playing your game and giving you feedback, the better. So early access is something that allowed us to do that, while we continue to work on the Switch version, the PlayStation versions, 4 and 5, and the Xbox versions, 1 and now the Series X/X.
Oh my goodness, we have to have a Plunder Panic tournament at Meaningful Play 2022.
Oh, I think we probably could do that. Yeah. So in 2018, we actually had our barricade there. So
yeah, that was so fun.
The original version of Plunder Panic was an arcade cabinet. It was built in a rum barrel, and with 2 screens on it, and people, being a circular shape was nice because you could actually literally have 12 people surround the barrel, and there's a red team and a blue team on each side, and that worked great at Meaningful Play 2018, and we could bring it back with the updated version of the game, and that would be fun.
And formalize a tournament. Yeah. You could win best conference paper, or you could win Plunder Panic champion.
Speaking of conference awards,
exactly. Many things, important things that we need to figure out as we plan this conference. Exactly. Great, Brian. Well, thank you so much for taking us through some history and thinking about some future here on SPARTIE-Cast. Is there anything else that you think would be interesting for, I'm guessing, like students who might submit to the conference will listen to this, maybe existing Gel Lab students or other MSU students who are interested, or even at other universities who might want to come be part of our program?
I mean, and in addition to the call for submissions for papers and talks, we do have a game exhibition at Meaningful Play. We've showcased lots of cool projects like Plunder Panic in the past at the conference, and typically they have, a meaningful play / serious game bent to them, but not always. Sometimes it's, a novel connection of technology and games and that sort of thing. So, definitely be on the lookout for that as well. And I think it's a very fun event at the conference. We have a game night basically where you come and see all the games that are being exhibited, and you could, help select the People's Choice Award at the conference and that sort of thing. So it's a really fun night to come out and maybe have some drinks and play some fun games that you otherwise would probably never see.
Yes. It's fun. It's fun to participate. It's fun. And it's a great pleasure to organize it with you. So thank you for that opportunity, Brian. And thanks for telling all of our listeners about it.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
All right. That was our episode with Brian Winn. If you like what you heard, hit like, subscribe, tell a friend, submit a paper to Meaningful Play, submit a game to Meaningful Play, tell your friends and family to submit a paper and a game to Meaningful Play if that's their thing. If not, that's okay. They can still support you in your meaningful, playful endeavors. Thank you so much to our production team, led by Taylor Halterman, also with Kyle Takpe, and our newest intern, Mia Burkhart. Welcome to SPARTIE-Cast, Mia, and thank you all for supporting SPARTIE-Cast, not just on our YouTube channel and our audio channels, all the podcast platforms, but we're also on the TikTok. That's how we refer to it, right? The TikTok. I am certainly not a TikTok native, but we're learning. And so if you listened all the way to this end of the episode, you clearly are invested. Go to the TikTok and like and subscribe and tell me what TikTok can do for SPARTIE-Cast. What kinds of videos should we make just for TikTok? I am excited to figure that question out. Thanks so much. See you next time.
Thank you for tuning into SPARTIE-Cast. Goodbye, world.